Hello, my name is Mark Abraham. For those of you who have not seen my previous clips in which I introduced my 25 years of postgraduate studies on the structure and function of the human mind, titled as The Interactions Between Instincts and Intellect and Their Impact on Human Behavior, published in these 6 books. In the first clip, I introduced, based on my studies, really what it is to be human, which sharply contrasts what we have grown accustomed to think and expect of humans and humanity at large. And in the second clip, I introduced my books and some of the content, one of which was what the subconscious mind is and why it has remained unknown, and how not only we can get to know it clearly, but also elevate it to conscious levels to manage it instead of being managed by it, to transform our lives. In this clip, I am going to introduce an online personality and behavior assessment test that I have structured based on my groundbreaking findings about what it is to be human and the structure and function of the human mind. Those 2 clips are supposed to create a context for us to more objectively and more scientifically understand the test that I am offering, for an objective comparison between my test and all the other tests that already exist. In fact, there are quite few of such tests in the market already, and I have selected 3 most popular and most successful among them for me to compare and contrast my system against them. And if I succeed in convincing you that my system is more scientific, my reports would be more objective and more inclusive, then I should be doing well against all the others which rank below these 3 most popular. The 3 most popular tests that I have selected are known as DISC assessment, Myers-Briggs type, and the third is Big 5 personality traits. And mine is known as Meet Your Mind. To make this comparison, I have created a table, as I call it, the big table that you see on the screen. I have placed these 3 competitors of mine on top of this table, and mine is located on the far left. Each of these 4 systems have selected different mental elements. When you take tests, based on the answers you have provided, they measure the strength of these mental elements and produce a report that describes your personality, that drives your behavior. 2 important factors need to be keenly observed here: quality and quantity. What I mean by quality is that the mental element selected, how relevant they are in the major aspects of human behavior for them to be worthy of assessing people's personality. That drives their behavior, number 1. Number 2, quantity. Because of the complex nature of human behavior that covers an endless spectrum and finds reflection in different dimensions of human behavior, depending on how many different mental forces, each of which is responsible for a particular category of human behavior, the larger the number, the more inclusive and encompassing the report becomes of the personality and behavior of individuals. And by taking these 2 factors into consideration, let us examine the mental factors each of these 4 systems have taken into consideration. The DISC assessment has the following 4 factors: dominance. Second is influence, steadiness, and the 4th is conscientiousness. Myers-Briggs has taken the following 4 factors into consideration: extraversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, judgment versus impression. Big 5 personality traits have taken the following factors into consideration: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. My system has taken 20 different mental forces into consideration, each of which plays a tremendous role in the behavior of the people who are marked strongly by any of these 20 mental forces. And they are as follows: fear, greed, tribalism. Each of these is, by the way, a human instinct. For example, this instinct of tribalism by nature fragments humankind into increasingly smaller numbers divided by race, religion, language, nationality, gender, age, level of education, wealth, so forth and so on, and set many of these tribes in hostile postures against each other and sets the stage for conflict, as we frequently see that in heterogeneous societies such as the United States, the tribalism and race problem is tearing this country apart, which also finds reflection in corporations and expensive court settlements. Then we have the instinct of aggression, the instinct of chauvinism, the instinct of being social. This determines how well receptive people are to others and how they enjoy the company of the others or associating with others, and whether or not a person would be a good team player or a hermit and a person with problem mixing with others, so forth and so on. Politicking, trickery, and manipulation is a major problem with many people, which because of the strong presence of this instinct in different people, they instinctively and by habit try to manipulate and trick others to impose their will and interest upon others against their will and their interest, and this always leads to a conflict. Then we have the instinct of sexuality that covers a wide spectrum in the realm of human behavior pertaining to human sexuality. And those who are marked strongly by this instinct, many times it leads to sexual harassment in work environment that also results in expensive court settlements that corporations really resent. The instinct of curiosity finds reflection in two brands of human behavior. At one level, it results in gossiping. People enjoy gossiping about other people within their cluster, behind their back. And at another level, it finds reflection in intellectual curiosity that strives to conquer new frontiers. And in either case, it is really important to understand human behavior. Then we have the instinct of laziness. It might strike some people as funny. We see laziness as an instinct. Not only it is an instinct, but despite the stigmas attached to it, in the right amount, it is a useful force, because as different forces and motivations drives us to strive for this, that, and the other thing, we need a countering force to bring us to rest, and so that we would not die from exhaustion. Dying from exhaustion indeed is a problem in certain parts of the world. For example, in Japan, it's a major problem, and they are diligently trying to find ways to deal with this problem, as many people are dying because of working too long and non-stop. However, when this instinct is in excess, people not only don't overwork, but they don't even strive to achieve the essentials of life. And when in deficit, these people become prone to become workaholic, and in either case, adversely affect the quality of life for such people. And therefore, it is imperative for us to understand where a person stands. Then we have the instinct of adventure. And this shows how level-headed or adventurous a person is. And this is not to say one is better than the other, depending on the kind of the work and kind of job people are involved. One might be more valuable than the other, but recognizing and understanding it, and at least becoming aware that this is a factor in human personality, is really essential. Because the human mind, from the perspective of this exclusive study, is bipolar and consists of instincts and intellect, then we also have to understand the intellect segment of human mind. That based on my studies, it divides into two distinct categories. I have labeled one of them as the utilitarian intellect, that pertains how resourceful and how creative the person is, and how capable they would be of applying that attribute to solve problems and achieve objectives. And then the other segment of the human intellect is the moral intellect, and that becomes the moral compass that shows us the right from wrong, and we behave accordingly. Now, as you notice, when you compare the mental elements taken into consideration in assessing people's personality, my system versus the others, each of these human phenomena is a major factor in my personality and behavior assessment test. The other systems that I shared with you have not concerned themselves with these mental factors the least, as if none of these mental forces of fear and greed and tribalism and aggression and sexuality and adventure and being or not being social and being or not being manipulative and so forth and so on matters in human behavior or human personality. And as such, can never expect a scientific and objective report from those tests. The mental elements that each of these systems have selected, I have placed vertically under these three different tests, and mine are placed horizontally under name Meet Your Mind. These horizontal and vertical lines intersect and boxes emerge. Each of these boxes represents a particular state of human mind. And because all of them fall into the horizontal lines, each of which represents a major mental force, for each of these states of the mind represented by each of these little boxes are strongly covered by my system. There you also see three letters of S, M, and W, standing for strong, moderate, and boxes that are shared by my system and also by any of the others are marked by one of these letters. And that means that if it is S, it means that that state of mind is strongly covered by my system and those systems. And if it is covered by M, it means that what my system covers strongly is covered moderately by the others. And if it is W, it is weakly covered by the others. Taking these into consideration, one of these three competitors of mine claim that the personality of all humankind is 1 of 4, the other claims it is 1 of 5, and the third one claims it is 1 of the 16th. And yet all of us have gone through different stages of life. Refer to your own personal experience from elementary school to high school to the university or universities some of us have attended to, military service that some of us have gone through, all the corporations that all of us have worked for, and our relatives, friends, neighbors. Accumulatively, each person knows good many people. And yet, no human can come up with two names with identical personalities because they do not exist, because no two humans are alike. The fingerprints, the voice and personality of each person is unique to that person. And to understand my system from this perspective, I approached two mathematicians and asked them to please help me understand if there are 20 different mental variables that govern each and every human, but the intensity of each of them varies from one person to another, in how many different settings these mental forces could represent themselves, each of which represents the personality of one person. And they both introduced the formula known as factorial in mathematics. And the way it works is that it multiplies all the numbers involved, and the result you get is the answer you are looking for. And I did a Google search and I found this formula applied, as you see on the screen. And the number this formula presents on how many different personalities humans can have is indeed an astronomically huge number that one cannot really comprehend it. And yet I was determined to make this number tangible for me to understand. The reason being that this number, for the first time, numerically presents the complexity of human mind. And to make it tangible, therefore, I divided that number by the current world population, which is about 7.5 billion. And by the way, I am rounding up the numbers. And the number I got was close to 17 million, which is to say that if the current world population was 17 million times as many as it is now, each person still would get a unique personality of his or her own that would drive their behavior. Now compare this to having 4, 5, or 16 different personality that defines the personality of all humankind. Please be mindful of the fact that this doesn't mean that this describes the personality of the humans who are living today, but that formula depicts the personality of all humans ever born, those who are living today and those who have lived before us. And scientifically it is estimated that the number of the humans born ever since our species turned into Homo sapiens have exceeded 100 billion, and therefore over 100 billion humans would have to have their personality to be one of 4, 5, or 16, and this automatically shows how unscientific and how whimsical the reports these systems produce become. Furthermore, when you take their tests, depending on which one you take, they produce a report which is 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs. And these texts are so short that cannot even describe a snail, much less the most complex phenomena in the universe, your mind. When you take my test, you answer the questions. The questions are short and very simple, and there is no right or wrong answer. It just depicts your taste and your values. And then you get immediately a report that presents the strengths of these 20 mental forces in a bar graph in a descending order. Number 1. Number 2, it comes with an elaborate text that describes each of these 20 mental forces, what they are, how they function, and how each of them impacts your life on a daily basis. And furthermore, it makes recommendations on how to manage each of these mental forces to maximize their pleasure and benefit, and to minimize their potential harm and mistakes that each of them can potentially lead you into. And in the process, it is this system that introduces your subconscious mind to you and helps you to elevate it to conscious level to manage it instead of being managed by it to transform your life. I need to make one more point. 2 of these 3 systems are based on a theory that Hippocrates, this Greek philosopher and physician, uttered 2,400 years ago. Then he said that all humans are born with 4 different body liquids, and the proportionality of these 4 body liquids determine the nature of that person, whether or not this person would make a good general or a good priest or a good teacher or a good business person or happy or unhappy and a bad person, so forth and so on. And Carl Gustav Jung, about 110 years ago, refined this theory, and 2 of these tests are structured based on this refined 2,400-year-old theory. Now, if we look at it in one way, we could say these tests are structured on 2,400-year-old theories, and looking at it differently, we could say that they are structured on a 110-year-old theory. In either case, these are too old, and just the same way as people do not neither manufacture nor purchase the light bulbs made 110 years ago, or the airplanes, or the vehicles, or cameras, or telephones manufactured 110 years ago, the same stands for this test. At their time, they were valuable things, and they were functional, and they helped people a great deal. And as human civilization marches forward, new gets born from the old, and the old becomes obsolete. And this test is no exception. Carl Gustav Jung also did another thing. He said that 2 things about humans can never be known. One is the subconscious, which I have briefly covered in my first clip, and the other is personality. And to understand what personality is, I have made an analogy that I would like to share with you. that might help simplify this notion. In the eyes of your mind, imagine 20 different rivers of different sizes, each of which represents each of these 20 mental forces. And the size of the different rivers represents the strength of each of these 20 different mental forces. These rivers ever calmly run parallel to one another. At one point, you dissolve a huge amount of dye of different color in each of these rivers. From that point on, each river takes a unique color of its own, such as red, black, white, green, blue, brown, purple, and all the rest of them. Further imagine, at one point, these 20 colorful rivers ever calmly converge at one point, so calmly that there is no disturbance in the water, and each river preserves its integrity represented by its color. And then you get a much larger river that looks like a rainbow. And this rainbow river suddenly reaches a cliff or falls, and this huge body of water descends with tremendous force, speed, and momentum. And at the bottom, all these colors get mixed up, and the river acquires a new color which consists of all these colors but resembles none of them. These colors become indistinguishable from one another. That represents the human personality, which is to say that these 20 different mental forces mix together, and together they constitute the personality of each person. It is estimated that in the year 2019, individuals and corporations in the United States alone have spent about $200 billion on these tests because of the lack of viable alternative. And it is estimated that this industry will become, by 2026, a $240 billion industry. And I intend to compete with the best of them in this industry, and I am confident that I will be able to hugely contribute to the staffing process of corporations, and as such, my findings and my tests will become the major disruptive force within this industry. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Be well.